everybody. So I promise I'm not up here tweeting. I just also have my notes on my phone because it's the first time I've done this talk. And I'm going to try not to fully juggle these 3 items, so that's going to be fun. But as Kuba said, I'm Sherrie Rohde. I'm the community manager at Magento, now an Adobe company, or Magento if you prefer. That's one way we've been saying that. And I'm really excited to be here today, though I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of nervous to be on this giant, awesome stage with you guys. But a couple days ago, I realized that I was right after the opening because I looked at this awesome app that Snowdog has, and if you don't already have it downloaded, you should for the day. So I realized you probably had some questions, but Ben already kind of answered them, but that's okay, we're gonna recap. So, oops, all right. Number 1, yes, Magento is now an Adobe company. Number 2, yes, open source is here to stay. If you need a source on that, here's a tweet from Ben. Ben would never lie to you. Number 3, if you didn't hear earlier this week, Magento on end of life is June 2020. We finally said something about it. You can go to our Twitter to check it. Please don't tell my mom that I just used Twitter as a source for you guys. She would probably kill me. Also, sorry, Kasia, that it took me forever to get you these slides. That's probably what the delay was just about. Okay, so I recently read that you're actually not supposed to open or close a talk with housekeeping items. So, sorry about that. But now that it's out of the way, what I really want to talk to you about today is you guys, the Magento community. Specifically, those of you who contribute to the community or those who would like to contribute to the community. You know what? It's not going to work, so I'm just going to forget half the things I was going to say. That's okay. Who here was at Contribution Day yesterday? Anyone? Okay, quite a few of you. Awesome. These are not from the Contribution Day yesterday, but they are from other Contribution Days around the world. Contribution Day, for those of you who don't know, is the opportunity to spend time with the Magento community and the community engineering team to learn how to contribute to Magento and focus on different projects in Magento 2. That is one of many ways to contribute in the Magento community. We now actually have a community hub on our website that shows various ways to get involved and helps kind of direct you around that, especially for people who aren't as familiar with those ways. But in 2017, I know we're in 2018, but we don't have all those numbers yet because it's September, right? The Magento community together created over 1,500 pull requests for Magento 2 on GitHub, presented over 750 talks on Magento or at Magento-centric events like this, produced over 200 podcast episodes centered around Magento. Those weren't all just Mage Talk, in case you wondered. Organized and produced conferences and meetup groups in over 30 countries around the world, wrote multiple books about Magento, and contributed to official product documentation, wrote countless blogs to raise awareness and education of the Magento platform, and answered thousands of questions, maybe even more than thousands, on both Stack Exchange and the forums. So what I'm really saying is basically you all are the best. Please give yourselves a round of applause, because that's awesome. So all of these contributions roll up into our top contributor program called Magento Masters that we launched in 2016. This picture is from Imagine this year, recognizing these 20 on stage. Well, 19 of them. We were missing Sonia. And it's really my favorite time of the year to be able to recognize these 20 individuals from across the community. They actually represent, I think, 13 different countries this year and various pockets of the community around the world. But one thing I've really noticed is a little bit of a worrisome trend, and that's that I'm constantly being asked, how do I become a Magento master? And I know what you're thinking, why is that worrisome? It's a good thing, right, to try to figure out how to be a Magento master. It is, but I think there's importance in the motive. So what I've noticed is that several masters have actually reached out and said, well, your focus shouldn't be on becoming a Magento master, but rather on where you can contribute for you and where you can help the community. So the focus should be on how you personally can contribute. And there's really 3 things that you can look at to kind of figure that out. Number 1 is, what is your personal field of expertise? What is your passion? and where's there a need. So when you overlap them all, you kind of have this super not fancy Venn diagram that I built for you that shows your sweet spot for contribution. There's a few individuals that I think have done this really well. Everyone here has heard of Mage Talk, maybe? Most of you, some of you. So that's a podcast that a couple guys in our community, Philip Jackson and Kaylin Jordan, put together as they were sitting in a hallway at Imagine talking about how there was no English-speaking podcast for Magento. I think something like 2 years later, they got around to putting out the first episode. But they're still going strong several years after that. And it's a great example of where they had an interest and a passion and where there was a need. Another one is Mage2.tv from Vinay Kopp. It's a great opportunity to share his knowledge of Magento 2 with the community in digestible video ways. Another one is from Rebecca Brockton in the UK. So she has a passion and skill in video and uses that to share information on the product, information on conferences, or just fun videos like what it would be like if we shopped offline like we shop online. And it's a really great way for her to pour that energy and that passion into a need for the community. Similarly so with TJ Gamble, an e-commerceaholic. So his is focused more around interviews with people in the community on key topics. Morning, they could last 6 hours on a Friday late night for you guys, afternoon for him. And the last way I wanted to highlight really is our innovation lab, which several people in our community have entered. And it just shows the need for different things like VR and chatbots and instant purchase and how our community has seen those needs and addressed them and made those things available. So why does all this matter? Well, it matters because of burnout. Just so that everyone knows what burnout is, because I realize sometimes we use words that are not necessarily all around the world or widely used. Burnout, just main dictionary definition, is the physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. And really, this is what happens when we focus all of our identity into our work or similar things. And we often like to brag about this. So we'll be like, oh man, I was in the office till like 11 p.m. because I'm so cool. And all these different things, but burnout is really not a badge of honor. When social psychologist Christine Maslach started researching burnout in just the 1970s, there was really nothing out there about it, no research, few people were even using the word. And now if you Google burnout in tech specifically, there are over 13.2 million results just for burnout in tech. And that actually is a 72% increase just from last year. So either burnout is on the rise or we're starting to talk about it more. And talking about it more is a good thing because it really addresses that badge of honor and moving on beyond it. So when I started researching this talk, it was for earlier this summer. I actually did a 5-minute version targeted at community professionals, knowing that I wanted to bring it to the Magento community as well to address things that I saw going on. And I found so many resources out there. I'll share the link with you at the end because it is important to do your own research. But I know there's a lot of skydiving fans here. One thing I noticed in the research is it's kind of like reading the terms and conditions for skydiving. So I don't know what waivers look like in Poland, but in the States we're obsessed with legalese, and the words injury and death are in bold and all over it. In fact, if you actually read the waiver, you probably don't even want to sign it. But the thing is, researching burnout is kind of the same way, unfortunately. There's so many warnings of health issues that come up in depression and mental health and all these various things if we don't actually address the problem and focus on eliminating that burnout or preventing it. Because unfortunately with burnout, you don't have smiles like these or the adrenaline rush at the end, so it's not so worth it. basically what happens is we get stuck in this self-perpetuating cycle that we just can't get out of as we pour more and more into our work to increase our identity. And it's hard to get out of. So why does all this matter at Meet Magento Poland? Well, it matters because you matter. And selfishly, I don't want to lose you guys. There are various reasons to leave a community, unfortunately. I've looked into that as well. But if you did, we would want you to leave by your choice, not because of burnout and feeling pushed out. And I think that when we're so focused on contributing in every single area that we possibly can, instead of finding one area that we can really excel in, unfortunately, what happens is we burn out. So, don't worry, there's good stuff too. The importance here really is to become kind of the captain of your own ship and turn it around. And so that requires really taking personal responsibility and looking at things that you can do to make sure that you stay grounded and that you're taking care of yourself. The first one is to set and keep boundaries. So I used to think that that this was not really so much of a good thing, but it is actually okay to be a bit of control freak about yourself. If you don't really protect those areas that people can be involved in, it just becomes really tricky. And this is where I would really like my notes, but they're down here, so just give me a second, sorry. Oops. Anyone have a joke? This venue is really cool, right? I apologize. I'm almost there, promise. Super professional, I know. It's not like I speak for a living or anything. All right. No, I'm in airplane mode because otherwise people will distract me. That's coming up. All right. Thanks, guys. All right, so what I wanted to say, had I had my notes or remembered, was that boundaries are very personal and they look different for each of us. So I could tell you not to work after 7 p.m. or to stay off your computer on the weekends, but that might not be the boundary you need, and it might not be realistic with your job or what you do. It's all good, we got this. In general, I try to remind myself that non-emergencies can wait for work hours, which are kind of a weird thing in my job. But one of the ways I do this is, since I do travel so much and often on weekends, I have a personal boundary of not working on the plane and not using Wi-Fi on the plane even when it's available, because actually life on the ground can stop while you're in the air, believe it or not, or at least wait for you. So, in addition to setting and keeping boundaries, we need to communicate them, because communicating your boundaries will help you protect them, and you do have the right to stand up for yourself, which is something that I think that we forget about. Okay, next one, practice self-care. So our community is really amazing in that they help those around them. But the reality is you can't really be there for others if you're not taking care of yourself. So it's kind of like when you get on a plane and they tell you that if the oxygen masks come down to put it on yourself before you help someone else, because guess what, if you can't breathe, you can't really help someone else breathe. And it's a similar thing. I know this because I've been there, and if all I care about is Magento, and I don't take care of myself, then I can't properly care for Magento or be there for the community. It's just reality. I need to sync these buttons somehow. So basically what self-care is we don't remember what recharging actually feels like and how critical it is for not only joy, but also for doing good work. And taking care of this issue does actually help us with taking care of others in our work as well. So how do you start practicing self-care? Well, find something you enjoy that's totally unrelated to your day job. For me, this has actually been volunteering as a whale watch naturalist, thus the photo. Whatever it is for you, make it a priority. I actually had a professor in college say that if all we cared about was design, then our design would be really boring. And I think the same applies to any area of work, really. If all you know is one thing, you're kind of a one-dimensional person and it's not that interesting for you or anyone else. Don't forget to take a break. Reestablish your identity and remind yourself of who you are. Make sure that however you choose to take a break, it does force you to disconnect, because your mind and your emotions both need to rest. This picture is from hiking Anacapa Island. Shortly after this, I got attacked by a seagull, and I was not smiling so much, but it's okay. It's still a break. As a general rule, I think most of us feel the need to be available 24/7 and sacrificing all other areas of our life that don't take place online. We're always connected but never present. I actually read it on the way over here that for every interruption, it takes 10 to 20 times the amount of interruption time to return to the previous task. So if you're interrupted for 30 seconds, it's like 5 minutes before you can get back on task, which is kind of crazy. I think our phones are kind of the biggest proponents of that distraction most of the time, at least for me. So I disconnect a few ways. One is by kickboxing, which requires all my focus. I've tried to multitask my brain, and kickboxing doesn't work well. They don't recommend it. Also exploring national parks, because you don't get service there even if you want to. And probably spending more money than I should on things like mani-pedis and massage therapy, but they help and they disconnect you. One way our community has done a really good job of this is #NoMagentoSunday. I don't know if you've seen this on Twitter, but Tag started this to really share how he was doing things unrelated to Magento. I realize this is a weird talk at a Magento conference, right? Telling you to talk about Magento less. But it's really been great to see how the community has taken this on and started to share their various ways of what else they do and how they recharge and disconnect. I'm guessing some of you like frameworks, because there's a lot of structured-oriented people here, of which I am not one. There is something called the 4-hour decompress from J. Paul Reed, which you can look up. But the concept is that every 2 weeks you take 4 hours out of your life to do these 4 things. So the first thing that's key is finding your location, going someplace meaningful to you where you can actually focus. And then for the first hour, you deliberately disconnect. And what that means is you actually check all those emails, go through those things, clear your mind, get rid of everything that you know you won't need to worry about for the next 3 hours. Then for hours 2 and 3, you're gonna pick an activity that you've been wanting to do but haven't had time for. Maybe you pick 2 or 3, you pick 2 of them so that you can bounce back and forth between them. And what that really allows you to do is something similar to how sometimes we come up with our best ideas in the shower or when we can't do something else. And it's the same sort of concept where it allows you to connect different synergies between them. But the goal is to wander through some unconstructed brain space leisurely, but in a way that's guided by mission and grounded in purpose. And then for the last hour, you just reflect, record, and reconnect on what you wandered through in the previous 2 hours and write down what came to you. And maybe that gives you ideas for your business or something to explore during your next decompress, or maybe just something fun you wanted to do that you hadn't thought about. But it really just helps sort through that. And then if that's too much for you, because some of us would freak out at the thought of setting 4 hours aside, and I will admit that I haven't actually tried that, though I have friends that have and they loved it. There's actually something on Twitter, called Tiny Carebot. You can follow it. And it just sends out little reminders in the midst of all of the angst and fun and craziness going on Twitter that remind you to listen to your favorite song or go outside or breathe or drink some water. And those are just really simple things that won't take you 4 hours to do unless you get lost, like I'm probably going to do in this venue today. Most importantly, I would say, is don't do it alone. Community is really important, and luckily we have a pretty great one. So we need community. Community actually helps us with burnout in several different ways. And in this community, there's a few ways to get involved with each other. So my favorite way is offline in venues such as this. I think it's really important to be able to really put faces to names. And there are meetups in over 30 countries around the world, like I said earlier. I know there's one in Poland next week, I believe, in Wrocław. law. I might be saying that totally wrong, which I apologize. But whatever it is, find one near you so that you can regularly get together with community like we are here today. And while you're here today, make sure that you meet at least 3 new people so that you can add those to your community. Another way is to get involved in Contribution Day. Like I said earlier, you're working on those PRs and everything together, and it helps you really build community and support as you go through your contributions. Online, we have the forums, which is another way for you to continually connect, because I realize not all of us have the opportunity to go to Magento conferences every week or multiple times a week. So that's there. And then Community Engineering Team also has a Slack channel that I definitely recommend joining if you're contributing on GitHub, because that will really help you as you're going along your journey and contributing to the Magento core. That being said, don't forget your personal community. The non-Magento people in our life matter as well, and it's important to know who's going to check in with you even when you don't think to check in with them. Ultimately, though, we need to take personal responsibility because everyone's journey looks a little different, and the research that I find for me might not be relevant to the research you would find for you. But as I mentioned earlier, burnout is related to mental health. It can lead to it. It's very tied into it. And David Manners and Rebecca Brockton in our community are huge advocates of mental health. In fact, you can go to MageMH.com or #MageMH on Twitter and see more of the conversation around that in the Magento space. And a little broader than our community is open sourcing mental illness in the broader tech community, specifically the open source community, and they have several resources on their website. I think that's where I actually found the Tiny Care Bot, but also they have manuals on there for employees and manual for employers to really help you figure out how to build an environment that is good for people, for all of us. So my research that I referenced earlier is at this link. That's just a Google Doc. It has lists of books I read, podcasts I listened to, articles I read on the subject. But it all comes back to these 4 things. So remember to set, keep, and communicate boundaries, practice self-care, find community, and take personal responsibility. And please do contribute, but please contribute responsibly and take care of yourselves. Thank you.